otaku and people just have to accept that. Well, that's fine, you can be an otaku, but there has to be so much more dimension to you. And I don't need to say it in a bad way, and I'm probably going to get a lot of backlash on that, but...
Because, it's a dating panel, and I think I want to talk a little bit about dating, like just an actual date, like boundaries and respect, and there's all these books out there like he's just not into you, or if you do this, or don't call her for 3 days but 2 days, but it's all bullshit as far as I'm concerned.
What are these boundaries you're talking about?
That means you don't ogle on the first date, or grab anything on the first date, or second date, or third date until she says it's okay. So
I'm not a here, Santa Claus. Let me show you your bag of gifts. At least I don't go after little children with that.
If you're gonna heckle the whole panel, you can leave. That's what you plan to do the whole time, because this is a dating 101 panel. So that's what you're gonna do. If you want to talk about dating, that's fine. No, you're not gonna heckle this panel. Okay, all right. So, because I see where it's going. So back to the dating as opposed to the comedy. Talking about dating and going out on dates and getting to know somebody is a really scary process. And having done it a lot, you want to know what cues you want to get from somebody and how to get to know somebody. And a common mistake a lot of people make is to make it all about themselves or talk about themselves too much because they're nervous, or to not talk enough. And what's the balance between getting to know somebody, going on a date, and when to make the right moves, so to speak, if it comes to physicality, or when to ask them out again. And there's all these questions that we all get nervous about. And I kind of wanted to bring it to the subject of dating, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We were just building, but that's a great place to go. Definitely when you find somebody that you're interested in, guys or girls, don't be afraid to talk to another person. That's probably the biggest fear. The first step is the contact, the initiation.
You're absolutely right.
Because as my friend once told me last night,
You don't judge.
if you walk into a bar, or if you walk into a store, or wherever you meet people, and you initiate contact, and they look at you funny, or if it doesn't go well, you walk out and you never see that person again in your entire life. And that's something that really stuck with me last night.
There's always misconnections on Craigslist. Yeah.
Funny story, my last boyfriend I met at Craigslist.
Really?
Yeah, it was funny because he had a post. He was looking for no, he's not. He was looking for a roommate, and I was on there. It was the time I was in a relationship, and I was very unhappy. I was dating a very hardcore otaku at the time, and that didn't make me happy because I was at a different point in my life. And I posted that I was looking for someone that would share my similar interests, and he posted to me as friends, and we talked for a little bit, and then we decided we were going to date. And that we dated for actually 6 years.
Oh,
so,
wow.
That's a good point.
It can work.
Speaking as a hardcore otaku, I can honestly say, yeah, sometimes when you are this kind of passionate about, anime and all that stuff, it does kind of sometimes consume our lives. So, I mean, the best way I've seen on how to date is to just branch out. I mean, yes, be passionate, like she said, but also just be honest with yourself. I mean, you want to do something else outside of anime and outside of all this stuff, and just be honest with the girl. That's what I found.
Well, what about also, you were kind of hitting on it there just a second, but I think what you might be hinting at is also being open to letting someone else's world into your world. You're into anime, you're into this stuff. Sharing that with them is great, but if it's like, oh my God, are we going to watch another anime? Why don't we watch what she or he wants to watch? And be open to other interests so that you can connect through that way?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's the best way. Oh yeah, because I'm an all-around nerd as well as being an all-around person. I just go out and branch into everything else.
Okay, that's good.
I think she has a question.
Oh, yes.
Oh, it's more of like a problem that I have, and I want to figure out if someone knows how to get over it.
That's true.
I've been watching anime for 15 years. I have problems because the people that I meet, I'm comparing them to the guys that I like in my series.
anymore?
Well, it's the problem. I love this guy's personality in this series, and this guy has that similar personality. Problem number 2. He's not real. Does not look like how I want him.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man.
Body color would change that.
For a while, I was like, I want a guy that's kind of pretty much exactly like Goku. And like, I was like, why can't I find this guy? And then like, I was like, well, I guess I can.
Goku's not a real person.
I know.
When you compare anime characters to guys, there is going to be a little bit of letdown because they're anime characters and they have different personalities than most people out in the real world. I think what you're doing with comparing them is maybe not right, but it's also not wrong. You should try and find a guy that's nice and decent and like that, but just don't try to compare him to like his overall standard, just putting him on a high pedestal with anime.
Yeah, comparison, I like to quote the Dalai Lama on this, comparison, here's a nugget for thought, is a form of violence. Now, think about that in gross anatomical terms, or when you're and you can do, and it's just a matter if you're talking about Goku or some magical character. I've dated women who are like, you're not like my last girlfriend. I'm like, well then why don't you go date him? You know, that kind of comparison makes, first of all, cuts you off from being open to receiving a relationship, and secondly, it's gonna, if it does come out or you're looking for that, it's gonna make a guy who might be a really great guy really feel small. That, you know, he's like, oh gosh, I can't compete with frickin' Goku. He's a Super Saiyan, for Christ's sake. You can't get, so getting out of that, it'll take a while, because you've been doing it for 15 years, but it won't take 15 years. And just being open to people as real people, because they, you know, remember, anime is heightened reality. It's exaggerated, it's hyperbolic, it's over the top, it's not real, you know?
Yeah, it takes 15 episodes for one.
You know, and the characters are like crazy exaggerations of different aspects of psychology and personality, and that's typical with writing. In terms of, if you read Joseph Campbell's work and all that stuff, you know, these archetypes that we have in terms of writing. These are all exaggerated things that are designed to be aspects of our psyche that help us. I think acting and storytelling is the earliest form of psychology, so it helps us figure out who we are, working through things, etc., but they're not, these are, so if you've got a person like that, like a real, and you'd probably go bonkers after a really short period of time.
I was actually just going to mention that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing to consider is anime characters, drama characters, I'm just going to throw that out there, they're essentially perfect. And if you found someone just like that character, it's going to drive you nuts. So the best thing I can tell you is find out what you personally like as a person versus what you personally like as a character.
Conversely, though, there are some traits that anime characters have that you can find in real people, such as nobility, honor, respect, you know, kindness. But people who have all those traits are also sometimes assholes because they have bad days, like everybody. You know? When you have to draw the line, and that's where you get into the subject of the threshold. Like, you know, a friend of mine is a comedian used to say, and I don't agree with him anymore, but he used to say, he's a really actually kind of famous comedian. He's really funny. He's like, however hot a girl is directly proportional to the amount of bullshit you'll put up with. And that's not necessarily true, but it is on a very superficial level.
That does make sense.
And everybody's got flaws, and being able to take the good and the bad with people is extremely important, but you have to decide what that threshold is. I mean, I recently got out of a relationship, and there was a threshold, you know, a couple months ago, and there was a threshold I couldn't handle anymore. And a lot of other guys I know can handle this particular threshold around, you know, ex-relationships. And I was not cool with that, and I had to make a decision about self-respect, whether or not I could take it, and I had to go. And it was really difficult, but so you have to decide what your thresholds are. Where people, especially women who get abused and stuff, get in trouble with, is that they'll tell themselves things that aren't true, and when you abuse crisis centers and stuff like that, say, well, it was all my fault. Well, you know, he was just mad that day. You have to, you know, people can have a bad day, but once it goes into like something crazy or abusive and it's consistent, that's a massive, you need to exit immediately, you know, and stuff like that. But thresholds around, you know, maybe he's a slob. Well, I gotta pick up after him, but yeah, I can handle that because I love him so much, or whatever. That's, you know, probably somewhere within the realm of a more acceptable threshold. So you have to figure out where your thresholds are, and the only way to do that is through experimentation, and that means date a lot of different people. You know, believe it or not, I learned a whole bunch about dating. I'll talk a lot, so I'll be quiet. I learned a whole bunch about dating from watching Bret Michaels' Rock of Love. Here's what I learned, because I was really nerdy. Here's what I learned. The only thing I didn't agree with is that he kept making out with everyone. However, that I thought was really great. The format of the show was really cool. He would spend time getting to know each person and showing them about his world, and then he'd ask about their world, and they'd spend time together both in person physically, because there's also a lot of biochemical stuff that's going on that we can talk about in a minute. And then, you know, he'd make out with them, which I didn't agree with that at all, because I'm like, okay, you're just kissing everybody, and you're going to get fooled by the hotness. So you want to, you know, want to connect with a real person. But I was dating, and I was the kind of person, I was like, I'm just going to date one person. But then I was like on a dating service and whatnot. And then I said, you know what? I'm just going to date lots of different people. I'm going to be really honest. So I'd go on a date and I'd say, you know, I'm hanging out, having a good time, so I just want you to know, dating a lot of people on a dating site, like I'm sure you are. I encourage it. I'm not sleeping with anybody, and I don't kiss on the first date. And I set up some boundaries. Most girls, I would say 90% of the girls I went out with, liked that philosophy. They were really cool with it. And I think we should, you know, and after the day I say, well, you know, I really enjoyed this, let's do it again. Or, you know, I'm really not feeling it, so I think you're great, but, you know, I'm just being really honest. In fact, I went on a date last weekend, and it was just like, you know, didn't work out, and I wrote her a nice email that said, hey, you know, this isn't, I wasn't feeling it, and she thanked me. She said, you know, thanks for just not dropping off the radar. Just, you know, thanks for at least writing, because I wasn't feeling it either. And I'm like, that's cool, you know, chat sometimes, no big deal. Being honest in a non, you know, sometimes we get nervous, we say stupid shit, you know, we're just like, you know, something idiotic, you know, and it hurts somebody's feelings. But don't assume and don't project that, oh, I don't want to hurt that guy's feelings. Lack of communication for me is way more painful than saying, I don't want to go out with you. That doesn't bother me, because I know what I got. I'm like, you know, I'm a good guy, whatever. But you think women get worried, oh, it crushes feelings. Trust me, you're probably awesome, but not that awesome. So I learned a lot from dating from Rock of Love. Although, like I said, I didn't mean like, you know, I think you were just using it as an excuse to make out with anybody. But that's one idea about how to go through a process of experimentation to figure out who's right for you. And by the way, just this is one last thing I want to say, and I'm totally going to turn it over to you. How many people are under 25? Okay. Whoa. I want to say a little bit about biology and brain chemistry. Okay. No, you just. Here's something I think is really interesting. I dated the day before I turned 25, which I thought was really interesting, because the day after I turned 25, I was regretting it. And first of all, if you think you're in love, chances are you're not. You're just horny. And there's a lot of biochemistry that goes on with this, but the first thing I want to say is that the reason I picked the age of 25 is that your prefrontal cortex isn't done developing until right around age 25, and that's the part of your brain you make decisions with. So you're like, oh, do you know any brain scans of people in love? They're almost identical to drug addicts. Okay? It's an illusion.
Drug addicts in love.
It's a total bullshit illusion. You think you're in love, you just want to have sex, and you're programmed to do that because your body's going, we need to procreate, we need to procreate, we need to procreate. So it's you're smelling hormones, you're smelling chemicals so that you drop your guard and procreate and carry on the human species. Your brain is thinking about one thing almost all the time: eating so you can procreate later, go to the bathroom so you can procreate later. It's all reproduce, reproduce, reproduce. We wouldn't have survived for millions of years if it hadn't been that way. So what I'm saying about the age 25 is I don't think anybody should get married before they're 30. I really don't. And I think that you should, you know, have several partners before then to have some experience. Don't be a slut, but just, you know, it's okay to have, you know, several monogamous relationships where you're, you know, having sex or whatever, and getting to know somebody and understanding that. So when you think you're in love, I mean, my high school sweetheart, I thought I was totally in love. I look back and I'm like, what the hell was I thinking, you know? It's all an illusion, and it takes a while for that hormonal illusion to dissipate, so that's why you have to date a little while before you sleep together, and that's why you have to date, you know, after you're sleeping together, you'll find that maybe after 18 months or so, you're not so interested. Well, that's because your brain's going, okay, it thinks maybe if you're not, you know, it doesn't know if you're using protection or not, so it thinks, okay, impregnated this one, next one, because your brain is trying to, evolutionarily, men are trying to procreate as much as possible. Women are trying to pick the best genetic selectors, and that's always informing us. And we think it's not because we build great buildings and we have great clothes and we have great technology, but we've only been like this advanced in terms of technology for the last like 100, 200 years. So evolutionarily, all this is going on. You see it in movies and television, and sex, and all the time. It's always going on, and they're trying to manipulate you. So when you think you're in love with somebody, you're in lust, trust me, for a long time. And then after a while you get to those layers come down, you see that person who really is, and that's where real love can begin. Real relationships with somebody can begin. And that's a hard thing to do, and it takes a lot of maturity and a lot of time to do that. So I would just have fun until you're after you're 25, then maybe start getting serious, and then by the time you're 30, maybe get married. And if you can put it off longer than that, I recommend it. That's all I'm going to say about that so far.
For the record, now I'm ashamed to be a man.
It's important for biology. the thing about, but here's the last thing. The thing about being an honorable man is looking at that going, even though I know my body's telling me to do this, this is another human being. So I'm going to say, yo, keep it down, homies. Let's get real with her and see who she really is. And see if we connect. You know, there's going to be all kinds of time for sex later. You know, all kinds of time. Trust me. You know, but in all that stuff that we think is part of relationships, and I'm disgusted with the way TVs and movies handle how relationships should be, and all these rules about don't call this and he's not into you. And I think Sex and the City is I don't like that show.
Thank you.
I don't think it's a good example of how women should behave. I think they think it's women's liberation, and they're like, well, see, we can do it just like men, but men are disgusting, so why do you want to be that way? I mean, not globally disgusting, but men can be piggish about that because we're, you know, huge amounts of testosterone flowing through us, and if I injected any one of you women with testosterone, trust me, your whole brain, it's like, I was talking to, you can relate to this, men. Testosterone-wise, I was talking to a friend of mine, I was like, yeah, sometimes you think you just want to grab a bull and like kill it, and half of you's scared, but half of you's like really excited. I'm trying to tell it to girlfriends, I'm like, I don't understand, like if I inject you with a bunch of testosterone, you'll be like,